You end up basically bleeding out through every orifice. It's horrifying. It's sort of been the basis for any number of television and movie diseases. But the thing with Ebola is that it typically has occurred in really remote areas of Africa, very small numbers of people. And the horrible thing is it kills like 90% of the people it infects, but because it has occurred in sparsely populated areas and is so lethal, it's sort of burned itself out. You get infected, you die, you don't have a chance to go anywhere and infect anybody. Now it has ended up in some of the largest cities in West Africa, where there are huge concentrations of people. And instead of having handfuls of victims, you know, we've already got hundreds and hundreds of dead. And they're not anywhere close to having their arms around this thing. You know, Doctors Without Borders has been sending up alarms for the last few weeks saying straight up, it's out of control. We do not have a handle around it. It's horrifying.
Now, with this, is this going to be, I guess, the next big, I don't know if you'd want to call it a health scare, because it's not really a scare. It's something that actually could happen. It's not like the bird flu and all that other crap that happened a few years ago that didn't really ever take, you know, much of a precedence. But is the Ebola situation, could this be a situation where people coming across the border could have it, or just from what I've heard, once you get it, you're pretty much done. There's no really, you know, it's not like a cold. You're not going to pass it on to people.
Well, there's a little bit of controversy about exactly how contagious it is, although, it's not like one person has it and instantaneously everybody within a square mile has it.
Yeah.
But here's the thing about the spread of diseases that I think people sort of know this but aren't really focused on it. Air travel has really transformed the way these diseases spread, and there's a lot of computer modeling that's done by people showing not just hypothetically how diseases spread, but modeling known diseases and how they spread. And basically what happens is you have, as soon as a disease makes it to any sort of central hub airport, where there are connecting flights in all sorts of directions, it then just begins to sort of leap out all over the globe. And if you've ever seen simulations of this, it's really terrifying. It'll just literally end up in New York, and then boom, it's in London, it's in Paris, it's in Los Angeles, it's in Hong Kong. It may not be 100 miles upstate in New York yet, but it's on the other side of the globe. And these cities in West Africa, as remote as we think of that area as being most Americans, are not cut off from the rest of the planet. I mean, there are direct flights out of these airports to places all over the planet, and a lot of them, particularly because of the French influence in West Africa, a lot of flights to Paris, and from Paris, then, of course, connections everywhere. So, yeah, there's some significant danger that you could end up with a guy with Ebola on a plane, and then the next thing you know, you have active cases in New York. I was just looking before I came on that we now have an American citizen in West Africa who's been they have diagnosed as having traveled there, and he has contracted Ebola.
Wow. Okay, so this is probably going to be a major issue over the next couple weeks or so.
I think it is going to be a major issue. Now, whether people get their hands around it or not is another thing. I mean, there are a whole bunch of reasons in West Africa why they don't have control over it: limited resources, lack of sanitation. Actually, people are actively resisting control efforts there. And they show up. Doctors will show up in areas because Ebola has been found there, and then the people are drawing the conclusion that the arrival of the doctors is what's causing Ebola, and therefore driving medical personnel out of areas, blaming them for the disease. So not only are you starting with limited resources, but then you're being actively prevented from treating the sick and obviously from stopping the spread of the disease. So
fantastic.
Stuff like that's not helping.
No, it's not. It sounds like just a bunch of damn chaos is what it sounds. We've got Charles Faddis with us today here on the program. Cyber attacks is another topic I want to get into here. It seems that there are cyber attacks on energy companies. Russia might be behind this. I know that several months ago there was an attack on a nuclear power plant. It was like it wasn't like a major full scale thing. They just basically wanted to see if they could take out the resources or whatever and destabilize it. There was a rumor that someone from the Middle East might have been behind that. With these new cyber attacks on some of these other energy companies, is this a Russia thing, or is this maybe possibly a Middle Eastern deal?
Well, I mean, there are any number of cyber attacks and cyber espionage efforts going on all the time. But really, since about the beginning of the year, I guess, there have been a couple of major internet and computer security companies like Symantec and so forth that have that these guys produce periodically reports on what they're finding on the net, and they have exposed the same network. All of these reports have exposed the same network coming. It appears from Russia. Sometimes they call it Dragonfly. Sometimes they call it Energetic Bear. But in any event, it's the same group, and they're pretty clearly coming out of Russia. And here's the disturbing thing is that a couple of disturbing things. One, the scope of the effort and the breadth of the effort is pretty clear that this is a nation state behind it. This is not a couple of guys smoking a joint somewhere in Eastern Europe, hacking their way across the planet. This is a big, regular, ongoing thing, and very successful in targeting our entire energy sector and also Western Europe. And it appears the idea is to gain such access that you would then effectively be able to take control of power plants, electrical grid, and so forth. And the utility of that in the event of a war or a confrontation or just a political crisis is obvious. I mean, you can start shutting down grids, sabotaging power plants, making generators self-destruct. You could really cripple a country without firing a shot from the other side of the globe.
Charles Faddis with us today here on the program, Coast to Coast and Border to Border. And one last thing that we want to wrap up here, and that's this border situation. This just continues to be horrible. The thing that I keep seeing out of everybody is, well, we're being invaded. There's all these people coming across the border. Well, my question is, and this might be something that you may be covering. I'm not sure, but why are all these people coming here? Because it's happening. It's not happening. A lot of it's not happening in Mexico. A lot of it is happening in some of the lower Latin America countries. Is there something major going on down there that they're trying to get the hell away from, or what exactly do you think is going on with that end? Or is it? Why has nobody wanted to mess with that end of the spectrum?
Well, I mean, my take on the thing would be this. Are there all sorts of problems in Central America? Yes, there are all sorts of problems in Central America, have been forever, will be for a long time into the future, just as there are in most places of the globe. What's going on now is that we have created a situation in which if you're a Mexican and you come across the border, we turn around and deport you relatively expeditiously. But if you are what the Border Patrol calls other than Mexican, in this case we're talking Hondurans, Guatemalans, and so forth, and particularly if you're a woman with children, you don't get deported. You in effect get released, and you're told to come back for a hearing, and then if you don't show up, nobody ever comes looking for you. And everybody in Central America now knows that that's the system. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. It is on the television. It is in the newspaper. It is on the radio. Every person, every guy on the block knows that. And so there's no end to the line of people that are now coming north to that border. We have created this demand by virtue of the way we handle them. And obviously not only is it a crisis for us in the border, but these people, I mean there's a humanitarian aspect, obviously. You've got women and children now by the tens of thousands that we are not prepared to handle in any fashion. Not to mention they're being preyed upon as they come across the border and everything. It's a nightmare, but we have created it by our own policy. We have effectively said, I mean, that's why they literally come to the border now and find Border Patrol agents and turn themselves in. You don't have to catch them anymore.
Yeah. That's the odd world that we live in, Charles.
It's crazy.
Before we let you go, what are some things you're working on this week?
Well, I'm actually digging into this whole cyber attack